Our next guest tonight is Nikole Hannah-Jones. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who covers racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine. She's the creator of the landmark 1619 Project, and she's out with a new book, The 1619 Project, A New Origin Story. She sat down with our Linsey Davis.
So take us to school. Explain why you feel that 1619 is a more appropriate birth year for this country than 1776.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's a more appropriate birth year. We certainly still have to acknowledge 1776 as a foundational date in American history, but what we're arguing is that 1619 actually tells you more about this country than 1776 does, and that it's a good place to kind of reframe your understanding of both our birth and who we are today.
What was your inspiration for the 1619 Project?
That's hard to answer quickly, but I learned about the year 1619 in a one-semester Black Studies elective that I took in high school. There was a power both in understanding that Black people had actually been here almost as long as the English settlers, which no one had ever taught us, but also it stood in for the power of erasure. That history is not just about what we're taught, but also all of the omissions.
So the subtitle here is A New Origin Story. Would you say that you're reframing the history or rewriting the history?
We're certainly reframing it. We're reframing it to say that oftentimes when we're taught about history of the United States, that slavery is treated as marginal, as kind of an asterisk to the story. And we believe that slavery and its legacy is central, that it is a foundational part of the American story, that slavery is one of the oldest institutions in America and one of the longest. So it's not a rewriting, but it certainly is a reframing.
You also argue that we're still feeling the ripple effects from 1619 when the first slave ship came, the White Lion. Explain some of those legacies of slavery that you feel that we still are experiencing today.
The entire conceit behind the 1619 Project is that the legacy of slavery still shapes so many of our institutions today. So there are essays that talk about American capitalism, the fight for democracy that we are still seeing. I mean, you can look at the insurrection on January 6th. You can look at all of the efforts in states to restrict voting. You can look at why are we the most carceral nation in the world. So much of our the experience that we have in America has actually been shaped both by the legacy of slavery in the way that it was foundational to our law, to our culture, to our politics, but also the anti-Blackness that really justified slavery.
Critical race theory, just the term, the idea of it has really become this catch-all phrase. How do you feel that we got to that?
I mean, we know how we got to that. It's a propaganda campaign. The fact that a year ago, none of us were talking about critical race theory outside of if you were taking classes at a college or in a law school, and that we're all talking about it. If you read the 1619 Project, then you know stoking white resentment has long been a political wedge tool that's been very successful, and that's why we're all talking about critical race theory.
And how do you distinguish the two? Because some people lump it all in, the 1619 Project with critical race theory. What is the difference?
Critical race theory, of course, is a framework that says after the civil rights movement ended discrimination in the law, why do we still see so much inequality? That's all that critical race theory is. It is trying to help us understand the existing inequality that Black people face. The 1619 Project has gotten lumped in with that because people don't want the 1619 Project to be taught because it centers Black Americans and it centers slavery. The 1619 Project is a work of journalism. It's not critical race theory. It's journalism that tries to examine our country and say, how did we get here?
In response to the 1619 Project 2 years ago in the New York Times, then President Trump created the 1776 Commission to create patriotic curriculum. What do you feel his role is in the lightning rod, basically, that critical race theory has become?
I mean, clearly Trump used the idea of the 1619 Project and saying that it was not patriotic, that it was trying to destroy America as a way to stoke his base. But I think we should ask ourselves, is what we're hoping our children get a patriotic education or an education that actually is reflective of the truth of our history? I don't think our role as educators should be to build patriots. It should be to build citizens who are informed about the truth about our history and the country that we live in.
When you think about where we are in this country and what the 1619 Project sparked, do you feel that it actually has in some way, your project, changed the course of our country?
Okay, I would never have the hubris to say that any one work of journalism could change the course of our country, but I certainly think we have played a role in a larger reckoning with why our country is so divided, why there's so much inequality in our country, why we still struggle so much to live up to these great ideals. What I've heard again and again as I've talked to people since this project came out was that they've been failed by their education. They've been failed by our portrayal of America in movies and in political speeches because they had no idea that so many of these things happened. But once you get that understanding of the systemic nature of the inequality, then I think you support policies that will address it.
Do you feel that we are in a time of racial reckoning, or is this, as you describe in the book, the myth of racial progress?
Definitely, this is the myth of racial progress. I mean, over the summer last year, it certainly felt different. We'd never seen protests that large, but it was very fleeting. And we saw that support, particularly among white Americans, decline pretty rapidly after a couple of months. I think that what we are most comfortable with as Americans is saying, yes, it was bad back then, but it's not like that anymore. And yes, we have inequality now, but one day in the future it's going to get better, and then that alleviates us of the need to act. And there's a lot of suffering happening right now, and we should be doing something about it.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.